I drove to my son-in-law's office that Tuesday morning to drop off the casserole dish my daughter had left at our house the weekend before. Such a small, ordinary errand, the kind of thing you do without thinking twice. I never imagined it would be the last ordinary moment I'd have for a very long time. My name is Earl Hutchins. I'm 68 years old, retired after 31 years as a mechanical engineer with a firm outside of Columbus, Ohio. I live alone now in the house where I raised my kids, the same house where my wife Donna spent her last 18 months fighting ovarian cancer before she passed 9 years ago. It's a good house, 4 bedrooms, a half-acre lot, a workshop in the garage where I still spend most of my afternoons building things that nobody needs but that keep my hands busy and my mind quiet. My daughter Bryn is my youngest, 34 years old, married to a man named Scott who sells commercial real estate and talks about square footage the way other men talk about football. They live about 20 minutes from me in a new development out near Worthington. I'd helped them with the down payment when they bought the place 4 years ago, $40,000. I didn't think twice about it. That's what fathers do. The casserole dish was sitting in my passenger seat when I pulled into the parking lot of Scott's office building. He worked out of a 2-story suite that his firm shared with a title company and a mortgage broker. I'd been there maybe twice before. I took the elevator up, told the receptionist I was just dropping something off for Scott, and she waved me through with a smile. His office door was open about 6 inches. I could hear him on the phone. I almost knocked. I had my knuckles raised and everything, but something in his tone stopped me. Not the words at first, just the tone. Low and deliberate, the way people talk when they don't want to be overheard. I stood there in the hallway like an idiot holding a Pyrex dish. "She's going to agree," he said. "I already talked to her about it. Her dad won't fight it. He trusts her completely. By the time anyone figures out what happened to the account, it'll be restructured. It's not complicated, Vince. I've done the math." A pause. "No, she's handled it. She's been managing his finances since January. He gave her full access. The man still uses a paper checkbook, Vince. He doesn't even look at his statements." Another pause, longer. "The house alone is worth $450, maybe $470 in this market. Add the retirement accounts and the investment portfolio. You're looking at just under $1 million, too. Enough to clear our debt and have breathing room. A lot of breathing room. A lot of breathing room." I don't remember deciding to walk away. I just found myself back at the elevator, still holding the casserole dish, my heart doing something strange in my chest. My daughter had been helping me with my finances since January. That part was true. I'd asked her to. After my knee surgery last fall, I'd had a rough few months, couldn't drive easily, got behind on things, and Bryn had offered to help manage bills, auto pay setups, that sort of thing. I'd added her to my checking account. I'd even given her a copy of my financial advisor's contact information. I thought I was being practical, easing the burden on myself while I recovered. I sat in my car in that parking lot for almost 20 minutes before I could make myself drive. The first person I called was my brother, Lou. He's 72, sharp as a tack, and he spent 30 years in banking before he retired. If anyone would know what the right move was, it was Lou. "Don't call Brennan," he said. Before I'd even finished telling him what I'd heard, "Don't call anyone at that bank yet either. You call your financial advisor directly today, and you tell him to freeze anything that requires a secondary signature. Don't explain why. Just do it." "Lou, maybe I misheard." "Earl, you didn't mishear. I've seen this exact thing play out 3 times in my career. 3 times. People love their parents right up until they need money more than they need the relationship. Call Gerald. Do it now." I called Gerald Marsh, my financial advisor of 14 years, from the parking lot. I told him I needed to put a hold on any account changes or transfers pending a review. He asked if everything was okay. I told him I wasn't sure yet. He said he'd flag everything immediately and that nothing would move without my direct authorization by phone. That bought me some time. What it didn't buy me was any peace of mind. I drove home in a fog. Sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Bryn used to do homework, where she'd cried into her cereal the morning after her senior prom, and tried to make what I'd heard fit into some other interpretation. some innocent version where Scott was talking about a different account, a different father, a different house worth $450,000. I couldn't make it fit. The thing about being an engineer is that you're trained to look at a system and understand it. You don't go on gut feelings, you go on data. And the data I had was not ambiguous. I spent the rest of that afternoon going through my financial statements, the paper ones I kept in a filing cabinet in the study, going back 2 years. I'd never been a careless man with money. Donna and I had lived below our means our entire marriage, paid the house off early, maxed out retirement contributions, kept 6 months of expenses in a savings account at all times. I'd worked hard for everything I had, and I'd always planned to leave most of it to my kids when I was gone. But gone on my schedule, not theirs. I found the first irregularity on page 3 of my January checking statement, a transfer of $600 to an account I didn't recognize labeled as a utility auto pay setup. Then another in February, $850 labeled insurance premium. Both amounts were plausible enough on their own, but the destination account number was the same for both, and it wasn't any utility company or insurance provider I used. By the time I'd gone through March and April, I had 9 transfers totaling just over $4,000. Small enough not to trigger alarm, consistent enough to be a pattern. I photographed every statement with my phone. The next morning, I called my old colleague from the firm, a man named Pete Garber, who'd left engineering about 8 years ago to go into private investigation work, mostly insurance fraud cases, the occasional domestic situation. I'd always thought it was an odd second act, but Pete was thorough and discreet, which was exactly what I needed. "Pete," I said, "I need a favor, something sensitive." He came over that afternoon. I showed him the statements. I told him what I'd heard Scott say on the phone. I didn't have to say much else. "I can trace that destination account," he said, "and I can dig into Scott's business situation. If he's got debt problems, there'll be a paper trail. Financial stress doesn't stay hidden forever." "How long?" "Give me 48 hours. While Pete worked, I had to keep things normal. Bryn called me the next morning, the way she did every few days, cheerful and chatty. She asked how my knee was feeling. Told me she was thinking of coming over Sunday to help me clean out the garage. I said that sounded great. My voice didn't shake. I surprised myself. Pete called me back on a Thursday. "Sit down, Earl." I'm already sitting. "That destination account belongs to a business entity called SRK Holdings, LLC. It was registered in Delaware 18 months ago. The registered agent is a man named Vincent Karp. Karp and your son-in-law are listed as co-managers." I knew the name Vince. He was the man Scott had been talking to on the phone. "The LLC," Pete continued, "has about $70,000 in outstanding debts to private creditors. Not banks, private. The kind of lending arrangement that doesn't show up on a standard credit report. Scott's commercial real estate practice has been losing clients steadily for about 2 years. He's had 2 deals fall through in the last 8 months that would have saved him. They didn't. And Bryn?" A pause that told me more than his words did. "She's a co-signatory on the SRK Holdings checking account, Earl. She was added 4 months ago." I set the phone down on the table and just breathed for a minute. My daughter wasn't a passive victim in her husband's scheme. She was in it with him. Pete gave me the rest of it. The $4,000 that had moved out of my checking account was sitting in SRK Holdings. There were also 2 inquiries on my investment account, not transactions, just inquiries that had been made from an IP address registered to Bryn and Scott's home address. Someone had been looking at my portfolio balance. Recently, Gerald had frozen things just in time. I asked Pete if he could help me get more. I wanted to understand the full scope before I made any decisions. He suggested installing a basic keystroke logger on my home computer. I had an old desktop I sometimes used to check accounts online, in case anyone accessed it remotely. I didn't love the idea, but I agreed. 3 days later, Pete flagged a remote login attempt on my computer from outside the network. Whoever it was got an error screen because Gerald had changed my access credentials as part of the account freeze. But the attempt told me everything I needed to know about the timetable they were working on. They were moving faster now. I called my attorney, a woman named Christine Holloway, who had handled my estate planning and Donna's will years ago. I told her I needed an emergency appointment, and I needed to rewrite my will completely. She made time for me the next morning. Everything goes to charity, I told her, sitting across her desk. I want it ironclad, and I want it done before the end of the week. She looked at me carefully. Earl, I have to ask, is anyone pressuring you? Are you doing this freely? I've never been more free in my life. I changed the will. The house, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, the savings. All of it designated to a combination of the Alzheimer's Association and Donna's name, the engineering scholarship fund at Ohio State that I'd contributed to for years, and a local food pantry that Donna had volunteered at before she got sick. Christine filed everything properly and gave me certified copies to keep. Then I waited. I chose a Sunday because Bryn had said she was coming over to help at the garage. I wanted to be on my own ground, in my own house. I asked Pete to park up the street with a recorder running. Christine was reachable by phone. Bryn arrived at 10:30 with coffees from the place she knew I liked. She gave me a hug at the door. She smelled like the same shampoo she'd used since college. I thought about her as a little girl, the way she used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car trips, and I had to take a slow breath to keep myself steady. We walked through the garage for about 20 minutes, her making suggestions about what to donate and what to keep. Normal, easy, like any Sunday. Then I said, Bryn, I need to show you something. We went inside and sat at the kitchen table. I put the printed bank statements in front of her, the ones with the transfers to SRK Holdings highlighted. She looked at them for a long moment without speaking. Her coffee cup was halfway to her mouth and just stopped there. I also know about the remote login attempt on my computer, I said, and I know your name is on the SRK Holdings account. She set the coffee down very carefully. Dad. I also know about the conversation Scott had with Vince on the phone 2 weeks ago, about the house, about my retirement accounts, about the fact that I don't look at my statements. The color left her face in a way that was almost clinical to watch. I'd never seen her look like that before. How did you... She stopped, started again. I can explain this. I know you can. I'd like to hear it. And here is what she said, sitting at the kitchen table where she grew up, in the house where her mother died, with her coffee going cold in front of her. She said that Scott's business had been in trouble for almost 2 years, that the LLC with Vince Karp was supposed to be a turnaround vehicle, a way to consolidate some deals and get back on track. But it had only made things worse. They owed money to private lenders who were not patient people. They were 4 months behind on their mortgage. Their credit cards were maxed. She'd taken a second job consulting part-time, but it wasn't enough. She'd started moving small amounts out of my account, thinking she'd put it back before I noticed. She told herself it was temporary, a bridge. And the login attempts? I asked. She looked at the table. Scott wanted to know how much was in the investment account. He thought if we knew the exact number, we could figure out how to. She stopped. How to what, Bryn? She didn't answer, but I knew. Pete had already told me. Scott had been consulting with a probate attorney. Not Bryn's knowledge, apparently, but Pete had found the appointment record about the process for having an elderly parent declared financially incapacitated, about how quickly an appointed guardian could liquidate assets. My own son-in-law had been researching how to have me declared incompetent. I told Bryn that. I watched her face change again, differently this time. She looked genuinely shocked, and then, watching her more carefully, I could see the moment she realized she'd known more than she wanted to admit she'd known. He told me it was just research, she said quietly, that he was just looking at options. He was looking at options for taking everything I have while I'm still alive and unable to stop him. She started crying then, not the performative kind, the quiet, ugly kind that people can't really fake. Her shoulders shook and she put her hands over her face, and for a while neither of us said anything. I didn't comfort her. I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to pull her into a hug the way I had 1,000 times before. But I sat on my hands and waited. What are you going to do? She finally asked. I've already done most of it, I said. I changed my will. Everything goes to charity. All of it. You and Scott will get nothing when I'm gone, regardless of how this ends. That decision is final and documented." She closed her eyes. "I've also removed you from my accounts, frozen everything, and changed all my passwords and security questions. Christine Holloway has copies of everything Pete documented, the transfers, the login attempts, Scott's appointment with the probate attorney. If anything happens to me, or if there's any further attempt to access my finances, she files everything with the DA's office the same day." "You talked to Christine?" "I did." "Are you going to the police?" "I'd thought about that more than anything else over the past 2 weeks. More than the money. More than the will. I had thought about Scott in handcuffs and Bryn in a courtroom and what that would look like, what it would do to the family, what was left of it." "Not today," I said, "but understand what that means. It doesn't mean I'm forgiving you. It means I'm giving you one opportunity to step back from whatever cliff you've walked to the edge of and to choose differently." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Scott is not going to take this will." "Scott," I said carefully, "is no longer my concern. You are. And what I need from you is simple. You're going to tell him this is over. Whatever scheme he had in mind is finished. You're going to sign a document for Christine acknowledging what happened and agreeing to a repayment plan for the $4,000, and you're going to have no involvement in my finances ever again for any reason. And if I don't, then Pete walks everything over to the detective division downtown tomorrow morning, and we find out together what a prosecutor thinks about elder financial fraud and conspiracy charges." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm genuinely deeply sorry. I don't know how we got here. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that I'd fix it, that you'd never have to know. But I know. But you know." She signed Christine's document the following Wednesday. The repayment agreement was modest, $4,000 over 12 months, but it wasn't really about the money. It was about creating a record, a paper acknowledgement that it had halved and that she was responsible. Scott, for his part, said almost nothing when Bryn told him. Pete had a contact at the title company Scott's firm shared space with, and word filtered back that Scott had gone very still and very pale when Bryn explained the situation. He called me once, 3 days later, and I let it go to voicemail. He left an awkward 50-second message that was half apology and half justification, and I deleted it without saving it. That was 4 months ago. Bryn and I don't talk the way we used to. She calls every couple of weeks, and the conversations are polite and short and feel like two people negotiating a treaty. I don't know if that changes. I don't know if it can. There's a version of me that hopes it does, that hopes she'll come out the other side of whatever desperation she was in and find her way back to being someone I recognize. There's another version of me that's just grateful to still have my house, my savings, and my ability to write my own checks. My neighbor across the street, a retired postal worker named Henry, stopped me in the driveway last week to chat. He didn't know any of this had happened. To him, I was just Earl from across the street, same as always. We talked about the weather and the price of lumber and the new family that had moved into the corner house. It felt normal, genuinely normal for the first time in a long time. I still think about what I overheard in that hallway, how close I came to never hearing it at all. How differently everything would have gone if I'd knocked instead of listened. If I'd just set the casserole dish down outside Scott's office door and driven home. By now they might have had full access to my investment account. By now some probate filing might have been in the works. I owe a great deal to pure accident. I also owe something to a decision I made the week after everything came out. Something I'd been turning over in my mind since the beginning. I went to Gerald's office and asked him to set up a modest gift, $10,000, designated as a scholarship contribution in Donna's name to the nursing program at Columbus State. I chose the nursing program specifically because the young woman at Gerald's front desk, she'd been working there for 2 years, always sharp, always professional, was finishing her prerequisites to apply. She hadn't done anything heroic. She'd just done her job well, every time I came in. But she'd also, without knowing it, kept my spirits something like intact during those weeks when I was sitting across from Gerald watching him freeze accounts and explain legal exposure just by being competent and kind in the middle of an ugly situation. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's more than enough. People ask me, when something like this comes out eventually, and it does come out, because nothing this jagged stays hidden, whether I regret not going to the police. My answer is the same now as it was 4 months ago. I don't know. I believe what Bryn did was wrong. I believe Scott is a man who would have taken my life's work from me without losing a night's sleep. I believe they both deserve real consequences. But I also believe that prison isn't the only form of consequence that matters. Bryn knows what she did. She'll know it at every holiday dinner, every birthday, every time she needs something from me and can't ask. She'll know it when the will gets read someday and everything she expected isn't there. She'll carry it. That's not nothing. What I've learned at 68 is that wealth makes you a target even among people who love you. Maybe especially among people who love you, because they've watched you build it, and they think they understand it, and somewhere in the gap between love and money, they talk themselves into believing they're owed a share of it before you're ready to give it. I'm not ready. I might not be ready for another 20 years. And now finally, everyone who needed to understand that does. I live alone, same as before. I still build things in the garage on weekend afternoons. I drink my coffee without thinking twice about it. I check my own bank statements now every month, first page to last, the way I should have always done. I read each line. It's a small habit. It costs me maybe 15 minutes a month. It's the best 15 minutes I spend. I still think about that hallway sometimes. The way I had my knuckles raised, ready to knock, and then just didn't. Something in Scott's voice made me stop. I've tried to figure out what exactly it was, and the closest I can get is this. It was the voice of a man who believed he was completely alone. No audience, no consequences. That's when people tell the truth about who they are. I don't believe the universe sends signals or that things happen for a reason in any tidy, arranged way. But I do believe that how we live our daily lives tends to produce outcomes that match those lives sooner or later. Scott had spent years making careless choices, bad investments, private loans, a business held together with optimism and other people's money, and he'd handled that pressure not by facing it but by looking for someone else to absorb it. That habit of mind, that refusal to deal honestly with hard things is what put him in that office making that phone call. And it's what I heard through the door. Brent's part in it is harder for me to sit with, because she knew better. She was raised to know better. I think about the moment she first transferred money out of my account into that LLC and told herself it was temporary, that she'd put it back, that I'd never have to know. That first decision was the one that mattered, and she made it alone, quietly, in the space between who she was and who she was becoming. Every choice after that was just the same choice made again, until it had its own momentum. What kept me intact through all of it, the 2 weeks of gathering evidence, the conversations with Pete and Christine, the Sunday morning at my own kitchen table, was something I'd built over decades without really naming it. I'd spent 31 years in engineering, learning to look at problems clearly without flinching and to solve them with the information actually in front of me rather than the information I wished I had. That discipline, that habit of clear-eyed thinking even when the answer is painful, is what let me hear what Scott said and respond with a plan instead of a breakdown. I think a lot of people, faced with what I was facing, would have either done nothing or done something explosive. Both of those responses would have cost me more than I was willing to lose. The steady, careful path. Verify, document, protect, confront, required me to hold myself together over days and weeks when every instinct wanted to either collapse or make a phone call I couldn't take back. That kind of endurance doesn't come from anywhere dramatic. It comes from practice, from a life lived with enough structure and self-discipline that when the ground shifted, I still knew where my feet were. And there's a question of what's right, not legally right, not strategically right, actually right. I chose not to go to the police, and I've made peace with that. But it wasn't an easy or automatic choice. It required me to think seriously about what I actually owe to people who've wronged me and what the purpose of consequences really is. I decided that Bryn living with what she did, forfeiting the inheritance she'd tried to take early, and rebuilding a life under that weight, that was a real consequence, not a light one. Whether it changes her is up to her. I've done what I could do. The 15 minutes I spend each month reading my bank statements are the most honest 15 minutes of my life, not because the statements tell me anything complicated, but because they represent a commitment to staying awake, to not handing over the keys to my own life and trusting that everything will be fine because people love me. Love and honesty are not the same thing. I know that now in a way I didn't before. I intend to keep knowing it.